Hello everybody! Welcome to the SOTI how-to video series introducing today the SOTI Snap workflow feature. My name is David Isa and I am one of SOTI's principal instructors from the global training team, and I will be taking you through the process of using our integrated workflow feature within SOTI Snap. And we're going to be doing this together by creating an app step by step that can help us solve the many challenges of not having automated, reliable, and portable ways to request approvals on many of the business operations that otherwise are going to be relying on manual processes to get this done. But before we jump into the workflow feature, remember to check our previous videos here in this playlist where we introduce the workflow designer and functions in our channel. Let's take a closer look at our agenda for today. We're going to start by quickly describing the many benefits of the workflow feature of SOTI Snap. We will then build an app using SOTI Snap where the workflow feature will actually help us add multiple elements to ensure the approval process is directed to whoever needs to handle it and how we can easily accomplish this. And as we build the app, we will then explain and take a closer look at the components of the workflow designer section within SOTI Snap. Then we will see how the app works, and just by having the whole system up and running operational in just a matter of minutes. Before we get started though, I want to mention that if you're still unsure of what SOTI Snap is and how it can actually help you accelerate your operations by taking advantage of every possible shortcut available to enable rapid mobile app development and deployment, there are multiple resources that are available in this channel that can give you a great introduction to this product. And remember to also check soti.net for more resources. Okay. Let's talk about the workflow feature in SOTI Snap. As we all know, SOTI Snap uses an easy-to-use drag-and-drop visual methodology in order to build complex user interfaces, add operations as well as functionality, and also to provide logic to mobile apps in both Android and iOS. The workflow feature of SOTI Snap follows the same approach, taking advantage of the ease of use of Snap's drag-and-drop capabilities. Now, this feature offers the ability to easily design, create, and add automation to your approval process on mobile devices in a very simple way. Automation is going to help us get things done faster, and it also decreases errors as well as omissions, and this is going to help us increase operational efficiency in our organizations because it's going to give us accountability and real-time visibility to both the person who's submitting the request and those that are approving it. That could be one person or multiple people within a team. This is going to leave a useful trail of data that can actually be used to improve current processes by taking a look at maybe possible bottlenecks in the process of requesting things or even for auditing purposes. The workflow feature has multiple use cases as demonstrated on the screen, and it can actually be used to create workflow in a lot of different scenarios in various industries, anything from retail, logistics, and healthcare. Here are a few examples of how you can use workflows for your approval processes. Having said that, the sky is the limit, and I am sure that if for any reason any of the examples here do not include something that is particular to you, you may be able to find ways to implement this solution into your needs and requirements and business operations. Now, let's take a look at a use case for the workflow feature. I believe that the easiest way to understand how a feature works is to put it into the perspective of a real case scenario, and this is exactly what we're going to do. What I'm about to describe is what we will be able to use the workflow feature in SOTI Snap in order to make it a solution that can be reliable, that can be automated, and that can also be efficient. Now, I have a customer called Rocket Co. Rocket Co is a growing grocery retailer in Southern Ontario, Canada, which is where we are based, that is actually working on providing a seamless experience across its multiple branches in different cities across our region as they are expanding. Now, expansion also involves readjustment, making sure that that same great customer experience that they're known for is applied to all of the stores they are continuing to open. In order to accomplish this, Rocket Co decided to implement a system of store inspections. The original process had several components that involved manual steps, and as you can all imagine, manual steps introduced several challenges, which included delays getting inspections completed, adding the possibility of errors, and also inconsistencies across different regions, and things often ended in dead ends since it was a bit unclear on who was in charge of handling and reviewing these reports at specific stages. And the whole process lacked transparency. You didn't know who was causing these delays. The idea was there, but the execution was lacking a structure that could ensure that consistency, transparency, and efficiency could be accomplished from beginning to end, and this is where SOTI Snap came in. Let's see at the solution as we deployed it within SOTI Snap in further detail. The field agent uses the mobile app to input real-time data on product shelf space. They're going to be using any resource available, including taking photographs using the camera app of their device, and submit a report, all of this through the facilitation of SOTI Snap forms. The input form, which we're going to be calling the shelf monitoring report, is going to be containing details such as the supermarket location, the date and the time of the visit, as well as the product arrangement details and any issues or observations they have identified at those specific stores. Once the field agent submits a report, an automated notification is going to be sent to the designated local manager or supervisors responsible for that supermarket's location and region. The local managers review the app details and validates the form details. They perform approval management and send it to the next level of approval. Once approved, the report moves to that level where the input form is now sent to a regional group of stakeholders. This could actually be regional sales leaders, finance or account managers, anyone responsible for this process. The group reviews the report and updates the details in the respective fields and then proceeds to either approve or reject the input form. Once approved, the field agent receives a notification. The app captures and records the approved status, including timestamps for submission, reviews, and approvals, providing a full range of visibility from beginning to end, allowing you to make improvements, but also to know who did what in this entire process. Let's see how we can build the workflow of this specific use case and accomplish that using SOTI Snap. And in order to do that, we're going to move over to the SOTI Snap console. Come with me. So right now we are at the SOTI Snap console in the app manager section, where we can see and find all the apps that we have developed, and I've been playing around for sure. And if we go over to the right, we are going to find a new app section where we're going to have three categories or three options available: create an app, create a workflow app, or import an app. And because we're looking for a workflow app, that's exactly what we're going to select. Here we can do a bit of customization to that app, and I'm going to be calling that one Rocket Co Shelf Inspection. We can give it a description, and we should be providing a key. Now, keys are very important because let's say we have multiple workflow apps in our organization that are going to be used for different things. Well, they're going to be identifying each specific request individually, so then the person who's approving or rejecting requests, they understand what they are for, and it's easy to find them and classify them as they are submitted through the system. So once we are done, we click Save and Continue. And what's going to happen is that SOTI Snap is just going to build the skeleton of our application. It's going to start by providing us the actual form. This is the submission form of the request. Now you see that it's quite basic. It only has a name and a phone, but you can customize this extensively by using any of the available widgets within SOTI Snap, which, by the way, you can learn more about them by going into our product documentation and all of the available resources here in this channel. Now, in our case, going back to our project, we also find that there are a few pages that were introduced, including the inbox. Now, inbox is the place where you will be able to see any requests that have come for you to handle as an approver or as a stakeholder. We also have My Request, which you will be able to see every request that you submit as a requester will be shown here, and you should also see the option to submit a new request in this plus button down below. We also have the option to click on the status section, and we should be able to track requests from beginning to end. This is going to show all of the different stages of approvals that have been defined in the Workflow Designer area, which I'm going to be showing in just a moment. Now, when you click on My Request and click the plus button, then the form that you define or design is what's going to pop up for that request to be submitted. Right here in the workflow area, this is our workflow designer, which will include the activities, the 5 different activities that are available for us to go in and design our flow of approval from beginning to end. Now, they have all been described in detail in the introduction to the workflow activities video that is part of this playlist in this channel. So go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Now, I did a little bit of cheating and I went on and I designed my form and other pages in advance just to make things a little easier for demonstration purposes. Just like any cooking channel, they do that as well, just to make this video a little bit shorter and relevant to showcasing the workflow feature. But as you can see here, I have my inbox is orange, my request, which is orange, my track request, but I have actually completed my form, my shelf monitoring report form according to the needs and requirements, and all I had to do was drag and drop the different widgets available in SOTI Snap. I can see here that I have several different fields, like the location of the supermarket, which is going to indicate which specific local manager is going to be doing the approval. We also have the store number, date of visit, a picture, and my observations, and then I can proceed to submit my form. What happens when that form is submitted? Well, that's what we're going to be designing here in just a few moments. If I go over to my workflow design area, I have my beginning or my start and then the end of my workflow process. So let's begin. When any field inspector goes in and submits their request, the first thing I want to do is provide them with visibility as to what is going on. All right, if we go to activities, let's begin by setting the status of the request as we begin the process. Now, the status is going to be quite simple. We received this, it's ready to go. It's beginning to go through the process that we're going to be designing here. So I'm going just to say receive request and my status is actually pending. Now I come over here and I delete this line and I'm going to start making the linking of my request to the appropriate status depending on how things are progressing. The next thing is to decide who's going to do that first level of approval. And remember, we had a few managers depending on different regions. Now, there are 3 different regions, the region of Peel, which there's a few cities that are part of that region. There is the region of Waterloo, and then there's the region of Halton, all of which are here in Southern Ontario in Canada. So what I need to do next is define who's going to be responsible for those approvals depending on region. And those regions are determined based on that form that the user completed. Now, if I go over to activities, I'm going to be able to find something called condition. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to drop it here. So the first condition is going to be for the location of Peel. So I'm going to give it the appropriate name just to make things a little easier for me to understand and find in this workflow diagram. And then I can go over to the conditions area. If I come over here, I can then select that any of the fields available in the form can be used to validate that condition. So for example, if the location equals any of the 2 cities in the region of Peel, which for those that are not familiar with Ontario are the cities of Mississauga, or the location equals, and when I say or is because I selected any here, the city of Brampton, then we know that we need the manager for the region of Peel. So we need to determine that for 2 more regions, the region of Waterloo and the region of Halton. So I'm going to be doing a duplication of my object. I could also come back to the activities and just drag and drop it, but because I already designed this, it's a little easier. So I go over here, instead of location Peel, it's going to be Waterloo. Waterloo, there you go. And then I modify the conditions for the city of Waterloo. Now, the region of Waterloo has 3 cities on it. First of all is the city of Waterloo, which I mentioned earlier. Then the city of Kitchener, which is where I am actually located. And finally, I'm going to be selecting the city of Cambridge. And there we go. Now we define the logic for the city of Waterloo. Now I'm going to do the one for the city of Halton, which is 3 more cities. So I copy this. I paste it, I actually make the changes to identify this. And under the condition, I select the 3 cities that are part of the region of Halton, which is Oakville. It includes Milton as well. And finally, the city of Burlington. All right, save it, and there we go. We have our initial level of validation. Now, depending on which region, you are selecting, we're going to be selecting different managers. In this case, it is just 1 or 2 managers. In this case, each region has 1 general manager. So I'm going to go back to the activities and I'm going to be selecting the user approval activity. I bring it over here and it is very, very simple. First of all, the user approval, I'm going to just make sure that I make this very descriptive. So I'm going to call this the local manager for the Peel region, which in this case is Abby. Now, you may be wondering where these names are coming from, and in order to explain this, we have to look a little bit into another product of the SOTI One platform, which is SOTI Identity. Now, SOTI Identity, it is an authentication and authorization tool that allows our solutions to connect to directories, your local directories, or other services like OneLogin or Okta in order to bring users or group of users from your own organization. Now, SOTI Identity is also able to create local users that can also be used if that's your preference and if you want to expedite things or you don't feel like integrating your own directories. But this is where these users are actually coming from. So once we have selected Abby as our manager, we then have the ability to define how this approval is going to work. Do we want to enable approval notes, and are they required or optional? Are we wanting to enable rejection notes, which in my opinion in this case will be very valuable, and I'm going to make those required. Do we want Abby to be able to send back a request to the submitter, and if so, are we enabling notes, and are we making this required? And also, are we enabling Abby to edit that specific request before it gets submitted to the next layer of approvals, which in this case, I'm going to say no. It's not something I need. Now that I have defined this, I know that the requirements are the exact same for the other managers. It's just that it's going to be for different groups of people. So all I have to do at this point is duplicate that approval and change that. Instead of being the Peel region, it's going to be the Waterloo region. And then I'm going to select the manager from Waterloo, which is Lisa. And then I'm going to duplicate this again. And I'm going to make this specific to the Halton region. That's very easy. I'm going to change the actual approver to be Mr. Chris, who is the manager for this region. And there you go. We have now defined who approves what based on location. Let's now make the next level of approvals take place, and this is going to be the actual regional managers of the Southern Ontario area, and this is actually the auditors of this entire process. So in order for us to do this easily, we are going to be adding an actual group approval activity. So I'm going to bring this over here. And the way we're going to be defining this is extremely simple. We're going to give it a name just to make sure that we can identify who we are targeting with this approval. And then we are actually going to be looking for groups. These are groups that are also coming from SOTI Identity. So instead of searching for individual users, we're searching for groups. The next thing we can define here is if you require the approval for every member of the group, or if you need to specify a number of approvers, which in this case, I'm going to select 2 of them. Next, I'm going to select whether or not I want to enable approval notes and whether or not I want to enable rejection notes, which in this case, I really think they are very valuable. We're also going to give the option to any of these auditors to send back the specific submission if something is missing, including the ability to add notes to it. But I'm not going to allow them to make changes to this submission because that is the job of the field inspector. Once this is all done, then I can begin connecting the dots. So we receive the request, and first of all, it's going to check if it's in the Peel region. If it is, it's going to go for approval to the managers of Peel. If it's not, then it's going to do another checkup. If it is within the region of Waterloo, it's going to ask for approval for the managers of Waterloo. And if it's not, it's going to make another checkup. And once again, if it is in the region of Halton, then it's going to request the approval for the Halton manager. And once any of these managers approve it respectively based on the region of the request, it's going to go over to the list of auditors, which is the same for the entire region of Southern Ontario. Let's talk about what happens once this final level of approvers or stakeholders approve or reject this specific request. So if the request is approved by the second layer of stakeholders, then the request is going to be approved. So if we go over to the activities, we can now set the status as approved. And the request is called closed approved. All right, so once that it's approved, we may want to notify the requester or the submitter that his or her request has actually gone through, which is a very powerful activity, and we're going to be using it now. It is called notifications, and it's going to send an actual email to the user at this stage based on the fact that it got approved. So we're going to make the connection, and if we go over to the send notification section, we are going to give it a name that this actually has been approved by the auditor. And if we click the button here, we can configure an actual email message. Now this email is very interesting because there's a lot of fields in the email that can be automatically populated based on specific placeholders you choose. For example, in this case, the submitter email. We can also select a specific subject, and we can put a message. Now, if we even want to make this a little more specific, I can go back to the subject and I can add a field that is going to select, for example, the visit date. So it's a little easier for the requester to know which specific request got the approval. We save it, and we are done approving this specific request. There we go. Now, what happens when the rejection of the request takes place? Well, it all depends on who and when and how. So let's say that the actual auditors rejected. Okay, well, in that case, I'm going to be changing the status to rejected. So I'm going to go back to my activities, and I'm going to set the status to rejected by an actual auditor. And remember, this is what the user will be able to see in the tracking area of their app. And then it's going to be close rejected. Then I'm going to be cloning this approved by auditors email, and I'm going to make the appropriate changes to make it fit the message that it actually got rejected. And I'm going to say that this was rejected because it was incomplete. So I'm going to call this rejected incomplete by the actual auditors. And if I go over to configure the email notification, then I can actually make the changes that I need in order to make it a little bit more accurate to what I need. So I'm going to mention that we need more details to make it a little bit more proactive, and then the actual message that applies. All right. And then the actual rejection at this level is completed. All right. So what happens though if the request is rejected by a local manager? Well, similarly, we can just duplicate these specific components, bring them over to this area, and edit them accordingly. So in this case, instead of rejected by an actual auditor, we are going to say that it was rejected by a local supervisor. However, the status remains the same. It is closed and it is rejected. Now for that email, we're going to make it more specific to the needs and requirements. And in this case, it is requesting complete. And we also need valid details. Now this was done by a local supervisor, and we're going to make this a little more explicit on the actual email itself. We come over to the email, we configure the email notification. We can see here that is very much the same, but we're going to add that is by your local manager in your region. So it's a little bit more easy for the person to understand what may be wrong with the request. Then after this is done, we can finish it up. However, there's another layer of rejections that we can and we should configure, and that is the one where the region doesn't really match any of the approvers that we have already set up. So in this case, I'm going to copy this, put it over here. Now, in this case, it wasn't really rejected. It was that we had an invalid location for this specific submission. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to call it invalid location, but it is also closed. In this case though, it's going to be said closed incomplete. Now I may also want to send an email that reflects what may have happened. So I'm actually going to be copying this, putting it over here, and I'm going to say that we did this because there was an invalid location. I'm going to come over to configure the actual email that I'm going to be sending. And I'm going to say invalid location. And then change the message accordingly, keeping in mind that I may want to add things like an actual date or anything here that can make things a little more easy for the submitter to identify what they did wrong. I make the connection. I make the connection, and you're gonna notice that once this is all completed, all of the different, and I save the actual project, it's going to identify if there's any kind of issues with my request, which in this case it found that says that some of the activities were not connected. So it's important to understand which ones there isn't, and it's easy to see here that is actually the rejection for the other managers, which I will complete. I will save, and it should work now. Now that we have defined this, I am ready to publish my app. I'm going over to the publishing section, and I am going to be adding any specific groups that are going to be used for the publication, which in this case include my Rocket code. I add it, and I proceed to publish. Once I do that, I can go over to my device. If my device is enrolled into SOTI Snap and I am part of one of the groups that I'm publishing to, this app should come over. So what I'm going to be doing is getting this device enrolled so then I can test this app with you guys. So follow me. We're gonna do that in just a moment. All right, everybody. Now we are ready to see this app in action, and it is time to launch it in SOTI Snap. So in my device, I have enrolled into the group that I published this app, which was the Rocket Code group within SOTI Snap. And so now that I publish, if I scroll down from the top, I should see that application loading, as you can see right here. And once it's ready to go, you select it. The first thing is going to happen, it's going to ask me to essentially log in, to identify myself using my credentials from Active Directory or whichever directory, or even SOTI Identity locally if that's what was chosen. In this case, I'm going to be putting my username and my password, and what you're seeing right here is me logging into SOTI Identity. Okay, so once I log in, it's going to show me the inbox area, and as everyone remember, it is in a orange color. Now, I am not a stakeholder, I'm not an approver or a rejecter, therefore I don't see anything on my inbox. However, if I go over to the My Requests area, I should be able to see the plus button where I can submit my request for one of the 3 different managers to approve as we move forward through the process. So I'm going to click the plus button, and then I'm going to see the different options available that as it was originally set on my form that I designed for this specific request. I'm going to select first the location, and in this case I'm in Kitchener. I'm going to put the store number, which is going to be store 13, and the date of the visit using the actual date widget is going to be today. I'm going to also capture the shelf image, which in this case I'm going to open my camera and take the photo of the actual object or the actual shelf that I'm using. And I'm going to enter my observations, which in this case are going to clearly say everything looks perfect at this store. Once I am good with what I submitted, I'm going to click submit, and that data is saved and is now go through the process. If I go back, I'm going to be able to see that under my requests, now I see that initial request that we set up, and it's going to have that identifier that we set up as the key. If I go over to the pending status, I'm going to notice that the pending status was changed based on the fact that it got just submitted and nobody else has received it. Once one of the managers, in this case, since I selected Waterloo, it's going to be Lisa, sees this request, Lisa can come into the app, and in the inbox, Lisa is going to see that there is an actual pending request. Lisa will then have an option to come in and either reject or select based on the information that was provided on that form. If she rejects it though, she will have to tell me why, because it was a requirement. When Lisa submits the option to approve, it will then go to the next layer of approvers, which will be the auditors, as selected in my workflow. And in this case, the auditors will get the exact same level of options. But in this case, remember, I had to choose 2 of them to approve it in order for my request to go through. In this case, once the 2 approvers proceed to complete the approval, because everything looked good in my request, I will be able to get a notification via email that the approval went through. And I'm also going to be able to see my request shown as approved. If I click on the tracking option, I'll be able to see when the approvals went through and who provided those approvals from beginning to end in order to make that completion and be able to finish up the process. In this video, we reviewed the components of the workflow app feature within SOTI Snap and learned how to build a workflow app with multiple approvals, workflow activities in order to allow you to design workflows with predefined conditions, user approvals, and different levels of statuses and notifications as needed by your operations. The components of the workflow app, such as My Request, Track Requests, as well as Inbox, can be customized based on your organization's needs and requirements, and SOTI Snap's workflow provides the complexity to build an intricate workflow process with a user-friendly interface in a way that is easy, drag and drop, and also intuitive. Thank you so much for joining us in today's sessions, and we will be looking forward to see you in our next video series for SOTI products.